The sky was black, filled with smoke and fire. A human escape pod fell like a dying star, crashing deep into the alien jungle. It hit the ground hard, sliding across the wet earth and breaking apart. Inside, the only survivor was Rick Mason, a mechanic from Earth. His leg was cut, his head was bleeding, and his suit was torn in many places. He looked around, but there was no help, no signal, no sound except the strange calls of alien birds. He limped out of the pod, dragging his injured leg behind him. Everything around him was wet, green, and wild. Huge trees touched the clouds, and strange lights moved between the leaves. Rick had crashed far from any known colony. No rescue would come here, not anytime soon. He needed food, water, and shelter. But while looking for tools in the wreckage, something else caught his eye behind a half-melted wall panel. Deep under some metal parts, there was a soft glow, a blue light pulsing like a heartbeat. Curious. Rick moved the debris and found a nest made of dried leaves and wires. In the center was an egg, no bigger than his helmet. It was smooth, glowing, and warm. The egg moved slightly, shaking gently, like something inside was alive. Rick reached out slowly, unsure what he was touching. As soon as his fingers touched the shell, a tiny sound escaped the egg, a soft, high-pitched chirp. Like a baby asking for help. His heart skipped. He should have left it. He didn't know what species it belonged to. It could be dangerous, deadly, or worse, but it felt alone. Just like him, Rick wrapped the egg in part of his torn blanket and took it with him. He found a dry cave nearby and started building a small shelter using broken panels and vines. At night, he sat beside the egg, whispering softly, "I don't know what you are, but we're both stuck here," he said. "You stay strong, and I'll keep you safe." The days passed slowly. Rick made traps for food and collected water in plastic bottles. And every day, he checked the egg. Every day, it glowed a little brighter. On the sixth night, during a heavy storm, it finally happened. Rick was half asleep when a loud crack snapped him awake. He looked over and saw the egg splitting open. Thin lines of light ran across its shell like lightning. Then, with one final crack, it opened. Inside was a creature small, silver-gray, with big black eyes and a long tail. Its skin looked soft, but was cold to the touch. It blinked at Rick, hissed once, then curled into his lap. Rick didn't know what it was, but it wasn't afraid. And neither was he. He called it Ash because everything around them had been destroyed in fire. But this creature was new. A rebirth. Ash learned fast. Within 3 days, it could walk. In 1 week, it was climbing trees and bringing Rick small dead animals. It purred when Rick touched it. It slept beside him. It even growled when something came close to their shelter. But Rick noticed something else too. Ash was not normal. Its claws could tear through metal. Its breath was warm enough to burn dry leaves. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dark. One night, Rick followed Ash into the woods. It had caught something, a wild animal. Large and fast, Ash took it down in seconds, using speed and strength no normal creature should have. That's when Rick realized Ash wasn't just an animal. It was a predator, something powerful. Maybe even dangerous, but it loved him, and he had raised it far away in the jungle shadows. Someone else was watching. Tall figures moved between the trees, wearing armor made of bone and bark. One of them carried a glowing spear, her eyes locked on the strange creature and the human beside it. She was Princess Varel of the Kirali tribe. And what she saw made her heart beat faster, not in fear, but in disbelief. A human, alone in the jungle, commanding a creature from legend, a beast her ancestors had fought and feared. She turned to her guards and whispered, "Follow them, but stay hidden." The jungle was about to change, and the tribe would soon face a choice they never expected. Rain dripped from the edge of the cave as Rick watched Ash sleep beside the dying fire. The little predator had doubled in size in just a few days. Its tail now stretched across the ground like a whip, and its silver-gray scales shimmered in the firelight. Rick still couldn't believe how quickly the creature had grown, or how deeply it trusted him. Ash had begun bringing back larger prey. It didn't eat everything it hunted. Some of it dropped in front of Rick as if offering a gift. It would nudge his hand with its nose, purring in that strange, deep way that sounded almost like distant thunder. Rick spoke to it constantly, using simple words. And to his surprise, it listened. It didn't speak back, but its eyes showed understanding. One night, when Rick said, "Stay close," Ash circled him twice and lay down right at his feet. Out in the jungle, the sounds were changing. Rick noticed fewer birds singing, and some animals seemed to avoid the area altogether. The trees felt quieter, like they were holding their breath. Something about Ash was affecting the balance of the forest, and Rick didn't know if that was a good thing or not. He taught Ash to stay low, to avoid fires, to not attack unless threatened. Ash followed every word like a loyal dog, but it wasn't a dog. It was something older, something with instincts Rick could never fully understand. One afternoon, Rick was sharpening a stick when he heard the sound. Footsteps, careful but strong, stepping over wet leaves with purpose. He froze and whispered, "Ash." Ash raised its head and growled low, the sound vibrating through the cave. Rick grabbed his broken comm device, now used as a flashlight, and peered into the trees. A flash of red cloth disappeared behind a tree. Another foot moved to the left, armored and silent. They were not animals. They were people lore close to it, aliens, tall and lean, with painted skin and bone blades. Hunters tracking something, and Rick already knew what. He and Ash had become ghosts in their territory. They didn't understand the bond between the human and the beast. To them, Rick must have looked like a dark legend come to life. And they were afraid enough to send warriors, and now? Someone more important. Ash stood and walked to Rick's side. Not afraid, not nervous. The creature sensed it too. Rick could hear the voices now speaking in a tongue he didn't recognize, but one he could feel through tone, not shouting. Not yet, but urgent, tense. A branch cracked nearby, and Ash spun around fast, letting out a sharp warning cry. Then silence, more silence, and finally, she stepped out, not a soldier, not a scout. She walked with the grace of someone who had never been touched by fear. Her armor was decorated, her eyes sharp, her face unreadable. A crown of feathers marked her as royalty. She stared at Ash, then slowly shifted her gaze to Rick. Her people moved around her, surrounding the cave, but not entering it. Rick raised his hand slowly, palms out. He didn't speak, he just waited. Ash moved between him and the princess. Protective, her eyes narrowed, but she didn't attack. She simply said one word in her language. Rick didn't understand it. But the tone was clear. She was surprised. Then one of her guards raised a weapon, and Ash responded in an instant. It leaped forward, claws flashing, and stopped only when Rick shouted Ash, "No." The creature paused midair, landed hard, and returned to his side, growling. The princess looked stunned. So did her guards. A human had just controlled a predator from their nightmares. She stepped forward, slowly, like approaching a volcano. Then pointed to Ash and spoke a string of words. Rick didn't answer. But he lowered himself beside Ash and touched its head gently. He didn't know what was coming next, but he could feel the change in her eyes. There was no longer just fear. There was curiosity, and something else Rick couldn't name. The moment ended with the princess giving a sharp command. The guards lowered their weapons, and she turned her back to him as she walked away. She didn't look back, but Rick could tell she would return. Ash licked Rick's hand. Sensing his heart beating too fast, he looked down at the creature he had raised from a fragile egg. A creature that now stood between him and an entire alien tribe. What had he done, and what would he be forced to do next? He didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. Princess Varel couldn't sleep. Her thoughts kept returning to that moment, the human, the beast, and how it had stopped mid-attack at just a single word. No hunter in her tribe, no elder, no priestess could do what that man had done. The creature was one of the old nightmares. Tales of the ancient ones whispered about silver-scaled monsters with fire breath and killing claws. It was believed they were extinct, wiped out long ago in wars no one remembered clearly. But now, one lived again, and it obeyed a human. She had watched how the beast walked beside him like a friend, not a weapon. The human hadn't begged, hadn't run. He had simply stayed calm, protecting the creature like it was family. It made no sense, but it had shaken her to her core. At dawn, Varel gave the order she would go back alone, without guards. Her people didn't understand her decision, but no one dared question the princess directly. They thought she wanted to kill the man. But she wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. Rick was sitting by the fire again, feeding Ash some smoked meat. The creature had begun to show signs of new growth. Its eyes glowed stronger, and sharp spines were forming down its back. It was still calm with Rick, but more alert, more aware. He looked up when he heard footsteps, slow and sure. Varel stepped into the clearing, alone, unarmed. Rick stood carefully, not moving toward her, just watching. Ash stayed low, tail twitching, eyes locked on the visitor. She said something in her language. Rick shook his head. Don't understand. She took a slow breath and pointed at herself, Varel. Then pointed at him. Rick nodded. Rick. Then she pointed at Ash. The creature hissed, but Rick placed a calming hand on its head. His name is Ash, Rick said. He won't hurt you. Varel stepped forward. Only 2 paces. Ash growled. But Rick whispered, it's okay. The princess crouched slowly and placed her hand palm down on the ground, a gesture of peace. Rick didn't fully understand it, but it felt ancient. Respectful. Ash sniffed the air, then took a single step toward her. Rick held his breath. The princess didn't move, even when the creature came close enough to touch. Ash sniffed her hand, stared into her eyes, then walked back too. Rick sighed and lay down. She looked at him, and something in her gaze had changed. It wasn't just curiosity. No, it was realization. He had raised the beast. He had bonded with it. And maybe, just maybe, she needed him without speaking. She motioned for him to follow. Rick didn't move at first. Stood up and walked after her without fear. Rick grabbed his bag and followed them both, deeper into the jungle. They walked for over an hour, past trees taller than any city. Building Rick had seen, they crossed a stream, stepped through glowing plants, and past stone ruins half buried in moss. Finally, they came to a cliff that overlooked a valley. In that valley was a village, her tribe. Dozens of fires burned, smoke rising in thin spirals. Warriors trained in the fields, elders prayed at stone circles, and children ran between huts. But when the villagers saw the princess return with a human and a silver beast, they stopped. Silence spread through the valley. Then came the whispers, the fear, the confusion. Rick could feel the tension like a blade at his back. Ash felt it too, growling softly beside him, but Varel lifted her hand, silencing everyone. She walked straight to the center of the village, where a tall, cruel-looking elder waited. The man's eyes narrowed when he saw Rick, then turned to fury when he saw the predator. He shouted something, and other warriors rushed forward with weapons. Ash roared, fire like heat building in its breath. But before anything could happen, Varel shouted one single command. Everyone, Froze. Even Ash paused, confused. She stepped between Rick and the warriors. Her arms spread wide. Rick didn't understand her words. But he understood her actions. She was protecting him. In front of her people, her elders, her warriors, she was risking everything. The elder barked another command, and guards slowly backed away, but their eyes burned with anger. Varel turned and looked Rick in the eyes. She didn't smile, but her message was clear. You're not just a guest now. You're a problem and a test, and everything will depend on what happens next. Rick sat inside a dark tent made of thick animal skin and bone frames. He wasn't tied up, but he was clearly being watched. 2 guards stood outside, never speaking, just staring at the entrance like statues. Ash was not allowed inside. That made Rick nervous, but he had no choice. They had separated him from the creature the moment they reached the village. Ash had snarled and roared, trying to follow, but Varel gave a sharp command, and somehow Ash stopped. It looked back at Rick with glowing eyes, confused and restless. Then it turned and allowed itself to be led away. Rick hadn't seen it since. And now he sat in silence, heart pounding. The people here didn't trust him. He couldn't understand their words. But their faces told him enough. They were scared of Ash. And they didn't know if Rick was its master or its weapon. The tent flap opened suddenly, and Varel entered. Her face was hard, emotionless, but her eyes told a different story, one of worry and maybe even guilt. She sat across from him on a fur mat and placed a stone plate between them. It held some kind of roasted meat and fruit. Rick didn't touch it. She pushed the plate gently toward him and pointed. "Eat," she said in a firm voice. Rick hesitated, then picked up a piece. It smelled strange, but tasted fine after a moment. She placed a metal object between them. It looked like a headband with blinking lights and tiny wires. Rick raised an eyebrow. She motioned for him to wear it, then placed a second one on her own head. The moment he put it on, a soft hum filled his ears. Then a voice not hers, not his, spoke calmly in his mind. Translation active. Rick blinked, then looked at her. "Can you understand me now?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, her voice now coming through the device, clear and strange. "Where's Ash?" Rick asked. "In a guarded pit," she replied. "No harm has come yet." Rick stood up fast, angry. "You had no right. He's not a weapon. He's a living being." She didn't flinch. "He is a beast from death myth," she said. "Our people still bury bones burned by his kind." "He's not like that," Rick said. "I raised him. He's different." She looked at him, studying his face like a puzzle. "That is why you are here," she said, "to prove it." Rick narrowed his eyes. "Prove what?" She stood and walked slowly to the tent entrance. "Tomorrow, you will show us what he is," she said, "and if you fail, you die." Rick froze. "You're joking." She looked back with cold certainty. "There will be a test in front of the elders," she said. "You, the beast, and me." Then she left. The flap closed behind her, leaving Rick alone in the dark once again. Morning came too fast. The sun rose red over the jungle. Drums began to beat, slow and steady, like a heartbeat counting down. Rick was led from the tent by 2 guards. They brought him to a wide open space in the center of the village. Dozens of tribe members surrounded the circle. Standing in silence at the far end stood Varel and the elders. Beside them, in a cage of stone and flame, was Ash. The creature looked restless, eyes darting around, claws scraping the rock floor. When it saw Rick, it cried out a loud, painful screech. Rick's chest ached, hearing it. Ash was afraid, and so was he. Varel stepped forward, her translator still active. "Today, we test," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "Is this beast a servantor, a storm? She turned to Rick. Make him obey. The guards opened the cage. Ash leaped out, wild and fast. The crowd gasped and stepped back. Spears raised. Ash saw Rickon stopped. It ran to him, circled him once, then stood protectively at his side, growling at the others. Rick placed his hand on Ash's head. "It's okay," he whispered. "They need to see who you are." Then he looked up at the crowd. He raised one hand, open palm, and gave a clear command. "Ash," he said. "Sit." The beast hesitated. The crowd held their breath. Then Ash sat. Tail curled neatly around its feet. Eyes calm. Gasps spread across the circle. Rick gave another command. "Roll." Ash blinked, then slowly rolled onto its back like a playful pup. A child in the crowd giggled. One of the warriors dropped his spear in shock. Varel walked into the circle. Now closer than before, Rick met her eyes. "Do you believe me now?" he asked. She said nothing. Then she turned to the elders and spoke in her own tongue. Their faces were tense, angry, and scared. But one of them gave a slow nod. Varel turned back to Rick. "You passed," she said quietly, "but it is not over." Rick exhaled slowly. "What now?" Her voice was heavy with meaning. "Now, you must teach me." Rick stood under the tall shadow of the stone gate, unsure if this was progress or just a new kind of danger. Princess Varel's words echoed in his mind. "Now, you must teach me." She had ordered a private training area to be cleared near the edge of the village. It was surrounded by thick vines and tall trees, hidden from most of her people. She didn't want the tribe watching her fail or worse, watching her die if Ash turned on her. Ash, on the other hand, was calm again. Its spines had grown sharper, and its body stronger, but around Rick, it acted like a well-trained hound. Still, its eyes changed when Varel came close. It didn't trust her, not yet. Rick tried to explain things slowly, using words and simple gestures. "This is sit," he said, showing the signal. "This is calm." Ash responded to him instantly. But when Varel gave the same command, Ash only stared at her, unblinking. "It's not just words," Rick said. "It's trust. It's how you speak, how you move." She frowned, frustrated. "I am royalty," she said. "My people obey without question." "Yeah, well," Rick replied, "Ash isn't your people. Day after day, they trained." Rick showed her how to approach slowly, never directly, and how to lower her voice when giving commands. She tried everything, and slowly something changed. On the fourth morning, Ash let her place her hand on its back without growling. It was small, but Rick saw it. Ash was watching her, not just tolerating her, that night. Varel didn't return to the royal tent. Instead, she stayed near Rick's campfire, silent for a long time. Finally, she asked, "Why did you raise him?" Rick looked at the flames. "I was alone," he said. "I needed something to protect, something to keep going for. He was just an egg, but when I touched it, it felt like it needed me." Varel nodded slowly. "In our stories, creatures like Ash were monsters," she said, "but you made him something else." "He's not a monster," Rick whispered. "He's just what he was born to be." The next day, trouble came. A young warrior named Tehran, ambitious, jealous, and angry, challenged Varel's actions in front of the council. He claimed Rick was using Ash to control her, to manipulate the tribe. He demanded proof of Varel's control over the beast. "I want her to command it," Tehran said loudly. "If it obeys, I will submit. If not, he dies." The council murmured in fear. Varel stood straight, her voice calm. "Then let the trial be at sunset." Rick grabbed her arm after the council dismissed. "You can't do this," he said. "Ash isn't ready. You're not ready." "I must," she said, "or they will never trust either of us." The sun dropped behind the trees, casting golden fire across the training field. The tribe gathered again, some curious, others hoping for blood. Rick stood to the side, heart pounding, Varel stepped forward, her face hard as stone. Ash stood in the center, waiting tense. She took a breath and gave the signal Rick had taught her. Ash didn't move. Terran laughed, arms crossed. Varel tried again, this time softer, more natural. She didn't force the command, she offered it. Her hand reached out gently, and she spoke just one word. Ash, the creature growled, eyes locked on her. Then slowly it walked to her side. It didn't kneel, it didn't bow, but it stood beside her, close enough to touch. The entire field went silent. Even Terran said nothing. Varel turned and met every eye. Control is not taken by force, she said, it is given through bond. Terran stepped forward, rage in his eyes. Then let's see how strong your bond is, he spat, before anyone could stop him. He threw a spear, straight at Ash. The reaction was instant. Ash roared and lunged not at Terran, but in front of Varel, shielding her with its body. The spear bounced off its armored scales, but the moment after the beast turned, its body blazing with fury, Rick ran into the field, shouting, Ash, stop! Ash froze, growled, then backed away slowly, breathing hard. Varel turned, shaken, but a live Terran was already on the ground, terrified. Rick pulled Varel aside. I told you it wasn't safe. You were wrong, she said softly. He protected me. For the first time, Ash walked to her not by command, but by choice. It stood beside her and looked up. Its eyes calmer now. Varel looked at Rick. He chose me, she said, almost in disbelief. Rick exhaled, both proud and worried. 'Cause when a predator chooses someone, doesn't change its nature. It only shares it. The tribe was quiet for days after the trial. No one dared challenge the princess again. Not after seeing the predator stand between her and a spear. Not after watching it obey her without force. But fear didn't vanish. It only hid. Some whispered that Rick had used dark magic. Others said the beast would betray them when it grew too strong. Even those who respected Varel didn't trust the thing walking behind her like a shadow. Ash didn't care about their opinions. It stayed close to Rick and Varel, always alert, always watching. It still hunted, still trained, but it no longer attacked unless Rick or Varel were in danger. The bond had grown, and Rick could feel something else changing too. Varel wasn't just learning from him anymore. She was matching him. Step for step, she began asking questions about Earth, about human tribes, about cities, love, and war. Rick answered everything honestly, even the painful parts. They sat together under the stars many nights, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing stories. Ash always lay between them, warm and protective. One night, Rick noticed something strange in the air, a heavy scent of ash, smoke, real smoke. He stood up fast and climbed a small rise near the edge of the village. What he saw made his stomach twist. The eastern horizon burned with orange light. Not a sunrise, a wildfire, but it wasn't natural. He saw shadows, moving large beasts crashing through the trees. They weren't part of the forest. They were part of something worse, wild predators. Packs of them, driven this way by hunger or war, and they were heading straight for the village. Rick rushed back, found Varel near the central fire. They're coming, he said. Big ones, maybe 10 or more. Varel didn't hesitate. She rang a bone bell. Calling the warriors, the tribe gathered quickly, forming defensive circles. Children and elders were led into stone shelters. Rick stood beside Varel, gripping a sharpened spear. Ash paced nearby, its body low, growling softly. The ground began to shake. The jungle trembled. Then they appeared, monsters covered in black fur, red eyes glowing in the dark, claws bigger than Rick's arms. The first one charged straight at the front line. A spear caught its leg, but it kept running. Then Ash leaped, faster than fire. It slammed into the creature, tearing it down with brutal force. The others hesitated. then roared and rushed the village. Screams filled the air. Weapons clashed. Ash became a blur of silver and fire. Rick fought beside him. Slashing, dodging, yelling, he saw Varel on the other side. Surrounded, 3 beasts circled her, snapping. Rick ran toward her. But he was too far. Then Ash saw her and roared louder than ever before. It launched into the group, ripping through them with rage. It didn't stop until all 3 were dead. Varel stood, breathing hard. Her armor torn, she looked at Ash, blood covering its scales. It stepped forward, slow and gentle, and nudged her shoulder. She touched its head, no fear in her eyes. Only something deep respect, maybe even love. The battle lasted until dawn, when it ended. Half the village was damaged, but most of the people were alive because of Ash. The elders gathered again that morning, their robes stained with ash and dirt. They stood before the tribe and did something no one expected. They knelt before Rick and Varel. One elder placed a carved bone ring in Varel's hand. "It is decided," the translator device whispered. "The bond is sacred, the beast is guardian, and the human is one of us." Rick was speechless. He didn't want power, didn't ask for titles, but when he looked at Varel, he saw that she was waiting for his answer, not with pressure, but with hope. Before he could speak, Ash stepped forward, placing its claw gently on Rick's foot. Then it turned its head and looked at Varel. The meaning was clear. The tribe was saved, but something deeper had been built between the 3 of them. Trust, loyalty, and, maybe something even stronger. But peace never lasted long on this world, and far beyond the jungle. Other tribes had heard rumors. Rumors of a silver monster, a human tamer, and a royal princess walking beside them both. They would not ignore such power. They would come to claim it'll destroy it. And when they did, the real storm would begin. The jungle was quiet again, but Rick felt the stillness was a lie. The battle had ended. The tribe had survived, and Ash had become a legend overnight, but rumors traveled faster than fire. Other tribes had seen the smoke, heard the roars, and now they marched not with curiosity, but with greed. Varel stood on the high ridge near the watchtowers, eyes sharp as flint. Messengers returned with reports of heavily armed warriors moving through the jungle, 3 different clans, united. For the first time in decades, their goal was simple: capture the beast and kill the human who controlled it. Rick stood beside her, arms crossed. "This isn't about Ash," he said. "It's about power." Varel nodded slowly. "They want what they fear," she said, "and what they don't understand." The council offered surrender. Give up Ash, and the tribe could avoid war. Rick expected Varel to hesitate. But she rose to her full height and said one word: "No." She turned to Rick and placed the bone ring in his hand. "In our custom," she said, "this makes you one with me." And with this tribe, Rick held the ring, feeling the weight of it, not just as a symbol, but as a promise. He didn't speak. He simply put the ring on. That night, Rick sat beside Ash under the moonlight. The creature had grown larger, stronger. Its wings, once small and hidden, were now fully formed. Stretching wide like dark sails, it looked at Rick. Sensing the tension in the air, "They're coming for us," Rick said softly. "But I'm not letting them take you." Ash rested its head against his chest, letting out a low, comforting sound. The next morning, the enemy arrived. Hundreds of warriors surrounded the valley. They beat their drums, shouted challenges, and demanded surrender. Varel stood on the front line, spear in hand, armor gleaming. Rick stood beside her, and Ash stood between them. The leader of the enemy stepped forward, a massive warrior draped in black chains. "Give us the beast," he shouted, "or we take it from your dead hands." Varel didn't answer. She turned to Rick. "Now," she said. Rick raised the old communicator they had fixed days ago. With one button, a loud signal echoed from the trees. Moments later, the sky roared. Ash launched upward, wings wide, a blur of speed and fury. It dove straight into the enemy ranks, not to kill but to scatter. It slammed into the ground. Sending shockwaves through their formation, flames burst from its mouth, burning only the soil, but enough to make the warriors stumble. Then Rick and Varel led the charge, the tribe followed. Fearless behind the human and the beast they once feared. The battle was chaos, but Ash moved like lightning, protecting Rick and Varel without pause. When Rick fell, Ash lifted him. When Varel was surrounded, Ash leaped over her, claws slashing together. The three of them fought like one, and slowly the enemy broke. Their warriors ran, their leaders fell. Not because of numbers, but because of something stronger. A bond between species, between hearts. When the sun set, the valley was quiet again. Ash stood on the ridge, wings folded, eyes glowing softly. The tribe gathered around, not cheering but bowing. To Varel, to Rick, and to the creature they once feared, Varel stepped forward, took Rick's hand, and raised it high. "This human came from fire and wreckage," she said. "He brought us not just survival, but a future." The people roared, not with fear, but with pride. Rick looked around and smiled, tired but proud. He had come here by accident. But now he had a purpose, a tribe, and something more. He looked at Varel. She met his gaze. No more walls, no more doubt. Ash lay behind them, resting but watching too. The three of them, human, princess, predator, had rewritten the laws of this land. They were more than allies, more than protectors. They were family, and no one would ever take that from them again.